Welcome to the Backyard Bourbon broadcast. In this very special episode, Jeremy finishes his interview with Shane Baker and Pat Heist, the co-founders of Wilderness Trail Distillery out of Danville, Kentucky. In this segment, we talk about how they use different floors of the rickhouses, what it does for the bourbon. You know, I think that kind of speaks to the popularity, being an outsider. We're not from Kentucky and not in Kentucky, and I think that's part of the appeal is just you all have such a rich history, you know, going through your families, being in that business, and the fact that you all kind of let us have a peek of how it all goes, and you're not being super secretive of everything, and it just seems like that's the reason for that popularity.
You know, the transparency that's out there now, I mean, you can't keep secrets anymore. And we've seen several brands that have kind of the milli vanillis, I guess, of the, you know, really weren't doing what they said they were doing. And, you know, a lot of that stuff has kind of come to light here in the last several, you know, we got to talking earlier about, you know, what sets bourbon apart. And, you know, the transparency and the fact you can actually trace it back to, you know, a few people that work at a distillery or, you know, the master distillers, the, you know, people who contribute to the process. Whereas, you know, some other brands, and we all know who those are, over the last, definitely in the last decade, have kind of been found out. Like, hey, wait a second, what I'm reading here on the label, what I'm paying a premium for, really is nothing but a fabrication. So, right. You know, I think that's something else that kind of lends to the popularity of bourbon is just the amount of, you know, like what you were saying about people at distilleries willing to share information and let you in and see what's going on. It's, you know, something else that kind of, when you're drinking it, you can think about that.
Yeah, and you know, and it's kind of interesting. You know, a lot of, or some people come in and they can't believe that, you know, we're telling people everything. It's like, you know, why, you know, if I were to take all these notes and go back to, you know, somewhere, you know, why couldn't I just do exactly what you're doing? And the reality of it is, you know, our grains are grown in different soil, you know, 3 miles from our distillery. Right. And that has a terroir, you know, effect on the flavor. The water that we use, the processes that we use, the equipment that we have, you know, how all that is set up, that and the natural flora that exist in all distilleries are what makes each distillery's profile. I mean, believe it or not, there's a lot of distilleries out there making exactly the same mash bills, but their whiskey tastes completely different. And so everything from barrels that you use, the type of rickhouses or palletized storage houses, or some people don't have either. They're storing them in a storage container or something like that. So all of these different things, like Pat is saying, kind of gives each distillery their own terroir flavor that you can tie back to that.
Right. Now you mentioned those rickhouses and that the different floors of your rickhouses. What does that do for the taste or the flavor?
Well, of course, part of the aging process or the maturation process is creating and melding these congeners into long chain esters and you know, formulating flavors. And very simply, that just takes time. It takes the right environment to, you know, right airflow and humidity and temperatures and those type of things. So what happens is, you know, we have warehouses that are from 2-story, which is really our single barrel warehouses, up to 5-story and 6 stories. So our 6-story warehouses store around 20,500 barrels each. And what you'll find is that the 6th floor of that warehouse on the hottest of a summer day may be 130 degrees, but yet the bottom floor in that warehouse may only be 90 degrees or, you know, 85, more ambient outside. Because the way those warehouses are designed to convectionally, you know, kind of just move the heat around. So what happens is we all know from kind of elementary chemistry that the molecules move around quicker when they're warmer. So the hotter a barrel gets in terms of aging, it's going to age a little bit faster than a barrel than in a cooler environment. It will also evaporate more whiskey quicker than a barrel in a cooler floor. So you're automatically changing the profile, the taste of the whiskey just by concentration of what's left in the barrel versus, what it evaporated out. You've got different things that can be extracted differently by the use of temperature. So upper barrels, basically again, are going to have a higher resinous, tannin, type of extraction from the barrel, whereas lower floors are going to have less of that woodiness, less of that furfural, less of those things. And then all of those, congeners, again, that are coming out of the barrel extracts that are in the distillate itself, those are all kind of bouncing into each other, forming new flavors, new approaches. And that's why, again, it takes a long time for heat to pressurize the barrel, push, whiskey into the wood, cold to contract that whiskey out of the wood. So that's how, it's kind of cleansing the spirit. It's melding, all of those different things together. And so you can definitely get a different profile from the top floor to a bottom floor. And in certain warehouses, you would say, this is our honey floor, because it's really, the right temperature range. For example, one reason why Kentucky ages whiskey so well, or better than most other states, is our average temperature here and our humidity levels. So, if you had a climate where it's always 110 degrees, that's probably not going to make very good matured whiskey. Or if you have a climate that's always, your average temperature is 40 degrees for the year, you might as well be over in Scotland aging a 15-year bourbon, because it's going to take it that long, because of their climates. Why our scotches and things age longer? Their climate is completely different than ours.
But, just so there's obvious differences, the higher the floor, the warmer the temperature. The way that our barrel warehouses are oriented, are they laying south, north to south, east to west, what side of the building gets the most sunlight? There's all these different factors that go into the aging, but also, leading up to putting the product in the barrel, there's other things that we can do to influence or to actually work together with the environmental conditions. And so, keeping a really good handle on fermentation to make sure that we're getting consistent alcohol production, sugar utilization. As Shane mentioned before, every distillery has their own little set of house bugs, is what they're kind of referred to. So bacteria, potentially wild yeast that inhabit the distillery that lend to flavor. But, also the concentration of alcohol in the liquid going into the barrel. We talk about extracting chemicals from the barrel. There are chemical reactions that are occurring over time. But, if you think about extracting from chemistry class, there are certain chemicals that are more water soluble. There's certain chemicals that are more soluble in alcohol. And so getting the right mixture of alcohol and water in that barrel will also help to work together with the excellent environment that we have here in Kentucky to, over time, produce that excellent product. There's a lot of different factors. Yeah, a lot. We don't have 50 years worth of data here either. So, every year, like when we build a brand new barrel warehouse, you can speculate on what's going to happen, but until you get product in there and start tasting it over time, that's where you can really start formulating, oh, wow, this is going to be a honey floor, or, this area is, the amount of sunlight and the amount of temperature fluctuation we're getting makes this area of the warehouse perfect.
Yeah, and so for us, we're usually, again, we're the science guys, so we're paralysis by analysis, of things. And so in each of our rickhouses, we monitor the temperature, for every floor, for every wall, for every center aisle. And that way, when we're tasting whiskeys and we're spreading out things, we can try to extrapolate that or connect it back to some data and everything from what was the fermentation analytics on that particular batch to what was the GC of the final distillate to, what was going into the barrels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, hopefully one day all that information with some master computer that don't even exist today will be able to help us understand, more scientifically, but what our palates are telling us is going in the right direction.
Now, where can listeners find your bourbons? And that's coming out when, April 28th, you said?
Yep. So April 28th, we're having a grand release here at our second annual Taste of Danville event, which is really a community event where we have a lot of local culinary, offerings, live music, just kind of a time to get out of the spring fever, cabin fever moment. So we're using that to do our releases, and then from there, it should be starting to hit kind of the stores for the limited release around Lexington and the Louisville area, and of course here in Danville, and some really selective, nice restaurants and bars. So again, our releases this spring, and we're going to have another release in the fall, and another release around before the holidays, and then those will be, again, very limited until we get to that 6-year mark. Fantastic.
That's all I have, guys. Do you have any questions for me or anything else you'd like to add?
No, those good questions. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you both for joining me today on this episode, guys. It was a great honor. It's Shane Baker and Pat Heist with Wilderness Trail Distillery. Their bourbon is coming out April 28th. Be sure to look for that. So I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to sit and talk with me. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed this 4-part series of the Backyard Bourbon broadcast. I know I sure did. A very special thank you goes out to Shane Baker and Pat Heist, the co-founders of Wilderness Trail Distillery out of Danville, Kentucky. I really appreciate you guys joining us for our very first Distillers episode of the broadcast. And that'll about do it for us here. Thanks for listening, and join us next time as we sample Blade and Bow Bourbon.